Hello! Today I'll be covering stories that I consider epic. This may be due to their length, their quality, the genre they're in, or just the fact that I really like them. This isn't to say that these are definitely my favorite fics, just they are pretty damn nice and are pretty badass. Quick disclaimer, I am not going to talk much about quality, because most of these stories are already quite good. Quality isn't as much an issue at this point due to the fact that these are all rather well written. I might in the future go over specific pieces of fiction in detail and say, give examples of what I find to be the best kinds of writing from there. Maybe I'll go and just analyze a chapter or two, something like that. But for now, I'm going to avoid anything that might also give away anything or, be a spoiler in general. So yeah, let's begin in alphabetical order. First off, we have Acceleration. Acceleration, written by Chibi Poe, is a story where Taylor can control velocity and vectors. And this gets rather crazy later on. Chibi Poe's writing often results in what you could call angsty protagonists. And justifiably or not, it depends on the piece of fiction. Next we have A Cloudy Path, written by Lax Creativity. It's an alternate power Taylor, wherein Taylor can build the technology of the Aeon Illuminate from the Supreme Commander universe. Unfortunately, there's been a bit of contention about this fic, as the people who like to read Supreme Commander related fiction usually are just waiting for that moment when the world becomes tanks. Cloudy Path is still rather street level, so that doesn't happen. But yeah, if you keep that in mind, it is a really good read of street level Taylor. Copacetic by Materia Blade. I have to say that this is personally one of my favorite pieces of fiction in the fandom. It's also one of the first things I actually read, and I remember back when it was just 2 or 3 chapters long, and it was just wow. There are specific chapters in Copacetic, specific chapters of awe that make me go wow. And whenever I need a pick-me-up, reading around the arcs of 20 to 23 of Worm, all these specific chapters never fails to give me a feeling of awe and just brighten my day. Now, it's a post-Golden Morning story where Taylor is dropped into another world and has to survive being a college student. The horror. But honestly, it's written quite well, and I would really just wish that Materia would update again. Because I don't want to badger anyone, obviously. And Materia also is writing Dominion and a few other things, and also Solar Towers. But I would just love it if another chapter came out. On the other hand, I don't want to rush them, so if you're listening, Materia Blade, just get it out eventually. Just give me your promise you are working on it, because I want to see this finished. Next we have Dire by Lost Demiurge. It's where an original character of theirs from their own universe, which they have also started publishing, which I think was called the Teslaverse. Yes, it's the Teslaverse. Their own character from their own property, the Teslaverse, is dropped into the world of Worm, and it is epic, hammy, and very well built as a concept, as a world, as how everything is introduced, and it just feels like one of those old, those Saturday morning cartoons, except it's not cheesy, and it's just so pleasant to read. I would definitely recommend reading this as well. Dragon Unbound by True Beasts. Dragon Unbound is pretty much a piece of fiction about a redemption or the growth of Saint as a character post Golden Morning. And that by itself is a rather good reason to read it. The fact that they execute it very well, to the point where Saint does to some degree get redeemed, is quite commendable. Now for the actual plot, what would happen if during the epilogue Pandora actually survived? It is the shenanigans of a dragon offshoot AI working with Saint while Saint doesn't actually know Pandora is an AI. And it's really good, well written, and that creates an amazing source of conflict later on. Empire in Green, written by Aubergine. or I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce that right. If you know Magic the Gathering, you know how powerful a Planeswalker is. Well, in Empire in Green, a Planeswalker gets dropped into Madagascar and shenanigans ensue. Not quite related to canon, but it is a very good read. Just wish it got finished. Firebird, also by Chibi-Po. Taylor now has the Phoenix Force inside her. Yeah, this is the temperamental mindfuckery Phoenix Force from the Marvel comics. Next up, we have Journey of the Dragonfly by Narcodoc. Essentially, all the capes inside the Dragonfly, on their way to fight Scion near the end of the story, accidentally travel back in time somehow. They wake up, they see the newspaper, and Scion is missing. From there, watch as butterflies go all over as people meet their pasts, and watch as Taylor does her thing. I feel attached to Journey of the Dragonfly, honestly. There are very few fics that manage to do shock and awe quite well, and along with Copacetic and a few others on this list, Journey of the Dragonfly is one of the better examples of that. Next up, we have Maharal by Joe 13. Golem goes back in time and applies Taylor's training and his, current situation of fighting Jack Slash to the past, and essentially becomes the past's weaver. He does one thing that most people think they would have if they knew the existence, and he goes talks to Cauldron almost immediately. So, if for nothing but that, I would recommend reading it, but also because it has an incredible writing style, and it feels just like we're watching a slightly different Weaver, down to the unnerving personality and seeming immunity to anything squicky or disturbing. Manager by Saraviel. In Manager, the Queen Administrator Shard has a bit more of a literal definition of administration, in the sense that they can change and they can move around powers. It's exactly as overpowered as you think it sounds. Also notable for the beta calls and for Slenderman. That sounds completely out of context, but you'll understand why once you read it, so read it. Next up, we have the Memorial Trilogy. I put Cenotaph, Wake, and Legacy together because I feel like it would be wrong of me just to have 3 entries which sound almost exactly the same. The Memorial Trilogy, by Notes, is probably the single most acclaimed piece of fiction and or series in the fandom. It's got impeccable writing, lots of fine subtle details that add a lot of depth to the story, and there is a very good reason a lot of people consider it a companion to canon. I don't even think I need to recommend this because there's a very high likelihood that if I asked anybody else in the fandom, if you asked anyone else, their first response would be to ask you if you've read this. That is how good, that is a testament to the quality of Memorial, of Notes writing. That's a testament to the quality of Notes writing, so I would definitely recommend this. Next up, we have Playing with Legos by Potato Nose. Now, Playing with Legos, Taylor is a Seraphim tinker and escalates in true Supreme Commander fashion. This is the piece of Supreme Commander worm fiction that the fandom had been yearning for, where she actually escalates to the point where she is by herself a global superpower. Read it. That's all I'm going to say. You should read it. Silent by Iclia. Yes, this is the fic I said before, which was written in 3 days and is 300,000 words long. So read it. In Silent, Taylor copies people's powers on touch and keeps them. Not she can only keep the last one she had, or it's slightly weaker or anything. No, she keeps them. I can't remember if she steals them or copies them, but either way, it becomes very powerful very fast. Speak with the Dead by Zeal. The shorter summary of this is Taylor sees the dead people. A longer explanation is that Taylor sort of gets the powers of the Fairy Queen, but instead of collecting the capes of the ghosts of dead capes, to use in threes, Taylor finds capes, dead capes, with their personality and everything, and she creates a contract with them to fulfill one last thing they left unfinished, and she gets their powers. Really well written, and there is an incredible, amazing exploration of Black Kaze. Highly recommend this. Highly, highly recommend this. Spirit of Nature by Varionox. So, essentially, Taylor and friends and enemies get transported to a completely different ancient world where they are worshipped as gods, literally, like with offerings, priestesses and everything. Really good concept, really good writing, really different, and a breath of fresh air, really. Sucker Punch by Potato Nose. The one story that came out of the Choose Your Own Adventure format that I've read and liked. The way Potato Nose writes it was just really amazing. Potato Nose is very consistent with his quality of writing, and it is very technical. It is very technical, but he somehow manages to keep it exciting. There's a reason he has 3 stories on this list. And part of it is because he fulfills my wish fulfillment for incredibly overpowered Taylors and other characters in general. But he also really humanizes and writes characters well. And speaking of Potato Nose, the next story on the list is Unnatural Disaster. Unnatural Disaster is also by Potato Nose, as you would sort of infer from what I implied. And in it, Taylor gets one of the powers I consider to be the most overpowered in the history of everything. The ability of total and utter control of everything at a molecular level, coupled with the Queen Administrator Shard's bullshit infinite multitasking. So you get things happening which involve Foof and rods from God and stripping atoms apart to create an incredibly large area of nothing but constant nuclear explosion. It's just it escalates. It escalates like very few manage to do, and in a way that is very Potato Nose. So yes, read this, but a fair warning, it is also quite technical. Finally, we have Zenith by Ryugi. It's a post-Golden Morning story with glorious solar bullshit. Taylor, after getting bullet surgery by Contessa, gets brought back to life as a solar. What follows is mass planning, is probably the most strategic of all the Taylors. Probably because of, glorious solar bullshit, so everything goes her way and she is quite lucky. Essentially, it's just a license to give them plot armor and everything you want without being too unjustified. But Ryugi writes it well, and he writes it quite interesting, so I'd also recommend reading it. And yeah, that's a list of all the pieces of fiction in the fandom that I would classify as epics. By the way, keep in mind that this technically isn't a list of all the pieces of fiction in the fandom I would consider epic, but a few of them I really have to put into other categories because they're lacking. And so I'll probably mention it when it comes up, but especially for the humor section. Silencio and the Techno Queen really should also be in the epic section, but just space. Also Goblin Queen in interesting, and probably Wild Hope for Parahumans as well. But yeah, I'll get to those later on in the next few weeks. That's all for this week. I'll see you then.